Here's a thought. How long do you think kayak fishing's got before it escalates into a booming sport? This video proudly brought to you by Fish and Yak, the original kayak fishing information channel. Hi guys, Glenn from Fish and Yak. Lately I've been thinking about the birth of kayak fishing in this country, where it presently sits and where it's heading. In the last 8 years, kayak fishing has increased by about 15% with water or recreational users on waterways. But I'm seeing a trend where it's increasing every year. When I go out on the water with my kayak, I'm starting to see more and more kayaks out there, which is a great thing. It's exercise, it's fresh air, it can be a family orientated event or a sport, or it could be an individual sport. And it doesn't necessarily have to be kayak fishing, it could just be using a kayak, paddling around for exercise and fresh air. But I am seeing a big increase, and that got me thinking the other day, why is our sport increasing at the speed that it is? Well, I'm a funny sort of a guy, I try and probably overthink things, but this I think I'm pretty spot on with. Just drive around certain suburbs of Sydney and look up in the sky. What do you see? Cranes. That's right, you probably think, what's cranes got to do with kayak fishing? Hear me out. New properties are being built, new homes are being built, but they're on smaller blocks of land. A lot of people are now moving into units and apartments where there's no storage whatsoever. Hence, no boating. No boats are being sold. Boating in this country has dropped because people, one, probably can't afford a boat now, two, they're time poor, three, and I think this is the big one, there's no room to store it at these new properties that are being built. Now, drive around and you'll see these beautiful new homes on 350 square metre blocks, and they've got a boat sitting out on the road. Now, councils now are cracking down on that. They're only giving the boat owner 2 months to have that boat sit out the front of the home, then it's got to be moved. Can't put it in the driveway because you've got a single driveway with a single car garage where the car is. That's how they're building these new properties. So what I'm thinking is a lot of people still want to be out on the water, and the cheapest alternative for them, and one of the best ideas, is to buy a kayak. So kayak and kayak fishing is slowly increasing, but it's increasing probably about 10% a year with people buying these watercraft, and it all comes back to the cost, the availability of time, and where to store them. A kayak you can store up the side of a house. You only need 600 millimetres off your boundary. You can store your kayak up on the side. A couple of brackets for $70, there's your kayak stored. Or you can store it in your garage hanging up from the roof. You can still get your car in. It's coming back to people's lifestyles and the way we're living. Our homes are getting bigger, but on smaller blocks. Hardly any backyard, hardly any front yard. One driveway, one garage, possibly two. Most people have 2 cars. Where do you put a boat? You can't store a boat. But a kayak, you can store it in your garage, hanging from the ceiling, or up the side of the garage, or outside under a cover. It's not going to take up much room. So this is where I think kayak fishing is going. People are getting into it because it's relatively inexpensive it's not expensive to get into kayak fishing, and you don't need a great big garage to store it, and you don't have to store it in your driveway, holding up a car spot in your driveway. Out in the street, you don't have to store your kayak out in the street. So they are a very viable alternative to people now that are living in apartments where they've got no garage at all. They might have a caged area where they can lock their kayak in a cage downstairs underneath their apartment. So the way we're living now is dictating what water sports we're involved in. And if you like boating, but you live in a tight community or apartment or unit, and unless you can afford a dry storage somewhere or on the water storage, maybe a kayak is the way to go for a lot of people. I'm thinking that's where the trend's leading. It's leading in that direction, that people are moving into these new properties and they're cramming everybody into these smaller areas, but no storage for for things like boats, not even cars sometimes. But I think that's where kayak fishing is going. And if it does reach a height in the next 10 years, which I think it will, it's going to be great. We're going to see specific outlets operating, selling kayaks and kayak fishing gear and fishing kayaks, because at this present stage in Australia there's only a handful of outlets that just cover kayaks and kayak fishing tackle. Not many of them in Australia. In America there's thousands of them, hence they've got the population though. But here I can see a bright future for kayak fishing. I really can. It's an individual sport, it can be a family sport, father and son, father and daughter, mother and daughter, it could be anything like that. You're out in the fresh air and there's no registration, no license, no fuel. The bigger kayaks, some guys put them on trailers, which is a good idea, but basically it's a cost-free alternative to owning a boat. I have owned boats in the past, and if you don't use a boat and you leave it out the front, that's the worst thing you can do to it. So basically I see kayak fishing moving on in leaps and bounds through basically the way we live. The way we're living, our homes are dictating basically what we can buy as a recreational vehicle for the water. So that's what I've been thinking about. So keep an eye on kayaks and kayak fishing, and let's see how far we can go with this sport. I love this sport to death, I really do. It's great, it's good exercise, you meet some fantastic people. Even if you don't catch any fish, it's just nice to be out there. It's very soul soothing, kayak fishing, and I suppose there's no need to tell you guys that, you know that, but I just thought I'd put that out there. I can see kayak fishing expanding at a rate of knots, pardon the pun, because basically people would like to buy a boat, they either can't afford it, haven't got that much time to use a boat, but they can't store them. So that's where a kayak comes in very, very handy for a lot of people. That's just a quick thought, guys. I thought I'd put it out there. So until next time, thanks for joining me on Fishing Yak, and don't forget to like us on YouTube, hit subscribe button, like us on Facebook as well. So until then, take care, see you on the water.